what I want to do is just take a little bit of time to kind of help you understand the comparison between how the Green Mountain National Forest is currently being managed, why it's being managed in its current manner, and compare that with the management approach, the ideas of proforestation, and then at the end talk about maybe some opportunities that we might have. Dr. Moomaw had this slide up earlier, so it's just a reminder about how fortunate we are to have this temperate broadleaf forest in the Northeast and how much carbon is being stored there. It's a very special area and it deserves a lot of special recognition and protection. What I'm going to go through is, I want to make sure it's clear, it's not meant to cast any negative light on the Forest Service, the Green Mountain National Forest Service, or the staff that are dedicated to carrying out the goals and objectives of the Forest Service. They follow the rules, the regulations, and all the laws related to managing the Forest Service. I work with there's some of the folks from the Green Mountain National Forest Service on this meeting, which I'm glad they're here. And I work with them and they're always very open to accommodating questions, discussion, etc. The real goal here is to help you understand why they're managing it the way it is and what the opportunities are. What I'm going to go through is just an overview of the Vermont forests and the Green Mountain National Forest, how national forests are managed. We're going to review very quickly some components of the Green Mountain National Forest Land Resource and Management Plan and the impacts of the current Land and Resource Management Plan on the forest and just what some opportunities are. So let's see, these slides, Dr. Moomaw had this slide also showing the benefit of no management of a forest to giving the maximum carbon storage. So real quick to go through some numbers, and one of my numbers on here is different from what Dr. Moomaw had, so I trust his. But Vermont is about 75% forested right now, about 6.6 million acres. The Green Mountain National Forest and other federal lands make up about 10%. State lands make up about another 10%. And what I had was the total percentage of forests that are protected from extraction. I had it as 3%. Dr. Moomaw pointed it out as 2%. It's next to nothing. It's de minimis, the amount of forests that are protected from extraction. The Green Mountain National Forest, again, just to help you understand it a little bit better, it encompasses 400,000 acres in southwest and central Vermont. It's the largest contiguous public land area in the state. It's within a day's drive of 70 million people, so it's very heavily used, as is the White Mountain National Forest. And it follows a multi-use ethnic, following various different approaches to forest stewardship, clean water, vegetation diversity, but it also, as part of its ethic, is high value and high quality forest products. As Dr. Moomaw pointed out earlier, it's part of what the Forest Service, part of their mandate is to look at our forests as sources of resource extraction. Forests are managed under the National Forest Management Act. The National Forest Management Act requires that every Forest Service develop a land management plan across all of the national forests, all the grasslands, and the one prairie that comprise the 193 million acre national forest system. It requires that forest plans contain multiple use goals and objectives, and included in those multiple use goals and objectives is identification of qualities of goods and services that are expected to be produced or provided during the planning period. Goods and services, forests being viewed as a resource. Forest plans are required to be revised every 10 to 15 years, and forest supervisors are required to review conditions of the land at least every 5 years to determine if the forest plan needs to be revised. So from a national level, every forest has to have a plan, has to revise its plan every 10 to 15 years. And then once that plan is developed and approved, and they have to follow a lot of processes to develop and approve their plan, that is what then guides their management activities on the Green Mountain, on their forest, and in this case, the Green Mountain National Forest. The current Green Mountain National Forest Land and Resource Plan was approved, Land and Resource and Management Plan was approved in February 2006. It guides all the natural resource management activities, forest-wide goals and objectives, management area, resource conditions. So the desired resource conditions, again, managing towards specific conditions as opposed to letting the forest grow. It includes levels of resource production that are targeted and the availability of suitable land for resource management. Again, managing the forest as opposed to letting it grow. So the current Green Mountain National Land and Forest Resource Management Plan is 15 years old, so it should be coming up for review and a new plan being developed. The current plan has 22 different goals, broad range of goals, and you can read them in the plan if you'd like to, but I want to point out specifically what I've underlined. One of the goals is to provide for sustainable supply of forest products and coordinated timber harvesting. So again, how does the Forest Service look at our forests? They look at them as resources for resource extraction. Not completely, but that is a lot of how they manage the forests. One of the goals, one of those 22 goals, goal number 2, is to maintain and restore quality, amount, and distribution of habitats, produce viable and sustainable populations of native and desirable non-native plants and animals. That sounds good, and it sounds somewhat benign, but it has 2 components that will require active logging. One is to achieve forest-wide habitat composition and structure, provide for a variety of habitat conditions for wildlife, and create a balanced distribution of age classes to meet timber objectives. And then 2, age class objectives. Instead of just letting the forest grow, they're going to actively manage to create different levels of age class objectives across the forest. The different age classes are regenerating forests, 0 to 9 years, young forests starting at 10 years, going to 30 to 50. Mature forests are the forests that are considered the most desirable for harvesting. And then old forests are typically 80 to 120 years old. And as Dr. Moomaw pointed out, we have very few forest areas that are that old. So within the forest management plan related to goal number 2, to give you an example, you can see on the left a table where they have specific objectives to manage to specific habitat types. It shows what percentage of the current forest is that habitat type and what the objective is for the forest percentage of that habitat type. The only way you can get there is through actively managing, meaning cutting trees. On the right is the age class objectives for suitable lands. Suitable lands are lands that have identified as suitable for timber harvesting. And you can see by habitat type and then by age class what the desired percentage range is for each of those age classes. And you can see that the desired range is highest in the young and mature area and lower in the old areas. So how do they do this? They have tools and techniques that they've identified in their plan to achieve the goals. Timber management is one of those tools and techniques. They talk about letting nature take its course, natural occurrences such as ice storms, wind storms, etc., those types of events. But natural events would not Green Mountain National Forest to the desired goals that are currently in the forest management plan. So they're going to have to actively manage and log those lands. The management and practices include fire. They do some controlled burning, but they include what's called even-aged and uneven-aged timber harvesting techniques. They do some clear cutting. The different types of cuts fall into categories such as shelter wood, group selection, individual tree selection, and other methods to create that balance of even-aged and uneven-aged. And when I say balance, balance according to the plan, not according to letting a forest just grow naturally. So here's an example of taking those goals in goal number 2 and putting it in place in a specific project, the Somerset Integrated Resource Project, which is the most recently approved project under the 2006 plan. And you can see here in the middle of this table, you see suitable lands, and you see the existing condition by age range. And this is as of 2019. So for the area that's included in the Somerset Integrated Resource Project, these are the acres that fall into those age ranges and the percentage of that area that's considered suitable for harvesting. Now, the Somerset Integrated Resource Management Plan had 3 different alternatives. Without going through the details of alternative B and C, alternative A was do nothing. Alternative C was the approach that was decided upon and approved. So it shows here that if they did nothing out to 2027, so if they did nothing, alternative A, you could see that mature forests would make up 46% of these suitable lands, this land area. But old forests would have moved from 29% to 51% of that area. Alternative C, which is what was selected, old forests went from 29% to 41%. So they did increase, but by a difference of, well, the difference was about a 20% reduction in the amount of old forest growth by going with alternative C versus leaving the forest alone, which would give us more of those older trees. And again, going back to Dr. Moomaw's presentation, those are the trees that store the most carbon, provide the most biodiversity, et cetera. So here's a real life example of how this management plan, which the Forest Service had to develop and they have to manage the forest according to, how it affects the forest under one of many different projects. So we talk about the different tools and techniques that they could use. And it's one thing to read them on paper, it's another thing to see some pictures. And these pictures are taken from Forest Service documents. And I'll show you some more pictures here in a minute. So you can see here an example of a clear cut, an aerial view of a clear cut. It says it creates a temporary opening of greater than 5 acres. Well, many of these clear cuts are far bigger than 5 acres. And when we say a temporary opening, temporary for how long, right? It's all relative. How many years is it going to take for those trees to grow back to the age, the condition, and the size that they were before? Then you see what's called patch cuts. They leave a few trees around per acre, but it looks kind of like a clear cut to me. Shelter wood cuts, they take away the canopy to allow for regrowth. They do retain some of the canopy, but they take away a lot of the canopy to allow for regrowth. Then there's group selection, which is just a bunch of small clear cuts, 1 to 2 acres in size, close to each other. And then they have these intermediate cuts where it's thinning, but again, compare this picture to the picture that Dr. Moomaw had of an older forest, and you can see it's significantly different. So since the 2006 Forest Management Plan was put in place, I've listed here the 4 most recent projects that have been approved since 2016, because these are the ones that have, I think, most of the active logging going on, but it's kind of hard to figure out exactly where all the logging is going on. But based on the information I've been able to get, this appears to be the ones where either active logging is happening or it's going to be happening because they've just been approved. You've got a project, the oldest one is the South of Route 9 Integrated Resource Project. It's down here in the blue in the southern part of the state, and I believe that's the one that Dr. Moomaw can see. It's 8,271 acres of approved logging. You've got the Robinson Integrated Resource Project, which is in green. It's up here. It's primarily in the Rochester area. It's a little over 10,000 acres of approved logging. You've got one called the Early Successional Habitat Creation Project, which is 15,000 acres. It's the largest one. And it's in red, and you can see it's dispersed throughout areas of the state. And then you've got the Somerset Integrated Resource Project, which is the most recent one that was approved. And it's a little over 9,700 acres. And it's this lavender right in this area right here. Add all these up, you've got over 40,000 acres to be logged in the Green Mountain National Forest. If you exclude the wilderness areas, this is about 13% of the Green Mountain National Forest that's going to be heavily logged. No matter what type of logging you call it, it's going to be heavy logging on about 13% of the forest. Here's some pictures that we've taken as we've gone out to visit some of the sites. These are all from the Robinson Integrated Resource Project, which is in the Rochester area. To give you an idea of what some of this looks like. I think Bill had this one in one of his earlier slides. In this one, you can see they've got some trees left, but not a lot. And here we go. There's some of the logs on a logging truck being carried away. This is a recent picture, as you can see from the snow. So again, the idea here was to let you know that the Forest Service and the staff, they have a direction of how they have to develop a management plan. They have a direction of how they have to treat the forest and how they have to view the forest, and then they have to carry out against that plan. The plan does not include the idea of proforestation, and that's where the opportunity is to talk to the Forest Service, and specifically the Green Mountain National Forest Service, about looking at our forests differently and recognizing the benefits of these forests and managing for proforestation, or basically don't manage them, leave them alone. So just some closing thoughts here, and then I'll talk about some opportunities for us. So the Green Mountain National Forest supervisor is supposed to review the conditions of the land at least every 5 years to see if the forest plan needs to be revised. When you think about it, given the increased understanding of climate change impacts, all the recent science that Dr. Moomaw referred to about the benefits of older forests to absorb more carbon, one could argue that it's time for a plan amendment. Or better, one could say, this plan is now 15 years old, it's time for a new plan. Stop implementing against an old plan that was developed using outdated data and start putting time and resources in developing the new plan and include proforestation in that approach. So we like to wrap it up real quick, and I know I'm doing this kind of before our Q&A. But at the end of these sessions, there's always the question of, this is very interesting, what the heck do I do now? Rachel mentioned this group called Standing Trees Vermont. It's a coalition of concerned community members and nonprofit organizations that came together as people found out about what was going on in the Green Mountain National Forest. I've got up here what our mission is and what our vision is. And our vision is really let the forests grow. Let them become old, let them return to their natural state over time. We have our website here, but the opportunity here is if you want to get involved within our website, you'll find a a Get Involved tab. And under that Get Involved tabs, there's two things. One is you could take action. Take time to write a letter to the Green Mountain National Forest supervisor and let them know that you disagree with the current logging plans. Let them know why. Let them know how you use the Green Mountain National Forest and why you think they should manage it differently than the way they're managing it today. And there's also an opportunity on there where you can complete a join us form and let us know ways that you'd like to get engaged and help us as we work to protect, preserve, and restore forests on federal and state lands. So I hope that was beneficial. I hope that helped people understand the difference between how the Green Mountain National Forest is being managed and why versus the idea of proforestation.